Alright guys, story time while I eat my noodles about the time that one of my friends almost kidnapped me and turned me into their pet. I know it sounds crazy, but just hear me out. Alright, so my friend T and I'm gonna call her T. She lived down the street from me. We were best friends. We used to hang out all the time until she moved away. Love you, bestie. You know who you are. Okay, so me and my friend T, who lived down the street from me at the time, we decided to ride our bikes down to her friend Jay's house. Now, me and Jay were kind of like acquaintances at the time through T. And so I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. Let's go hang out. Let's go have some fun. So we get there, whatever, everything's fine. We're playing one of our favorite games that me and T like to play together called Kim Possible, where basically we would literally just pretend to be Kim Possible characters. Okay, like we would take turns pretending to be Kim and then all the other characters and like, you know, have this little adventure, whatever. So we were doing that, and then all of a sudden we wanted to take a break. We were like, okay, we're getting really tired. Mind you, okay, let me just backtrack a little bit. Back it up. We were home alone at Jay's house. Her mom was like a single mom and she had a job. She had multiple jobs to do. So we were just there by ourselves. So we're getting hungry. And so we stopped playing their game and we go into like, so they have like this little like screened off porch area towards the back of their house. So like if you think about it, like their house is like, this is their front door. You walk in and there's like the little mud room. Then you walk in through the mud room and then there's the kitchen. And then behind the kitchen, there's that like little screened off porch area. So while Jay was like rummaging through the kitchen to find us something to eat, T and I went into the like sunroom area and just kind of sat down and waited. And that's when Jay decided to close me and T into the screen room. And mind you, this was like a screen room that apparently like they must have built it themselves or something, because it didn't have a door leading to the outside. And I don't know what this family was on or whatever, but it had like bulletproof windows that did not open either. Who the fuck has a sunroom? Who the fuck? Maybe they did open and we just didn't know, but I was gonna say like, who the fuck has a sunroom with windows that don't open? Maybe they did open and we just couldn't figure it out, but whatever. I digress. We were locked in that sunroom, right? At first we're like, oh my god, tee hee ha ha, like, you're so funny, Jay, like, what the fuck are you doing? Get us out of here, blah, blah, blah. And she wouldn't, and it was like turning into like this little game or whatever, where she was like our master and we were like her little dogs. And the sunroom was our cage, right? Okay, but then like hours of us being in there, like, and then like getting really hot and then begging for her to open the door and let us out. She was like getting psychotic and like would not let us out. We needed water, we needed food. So the fucking bitch, oh my god, she was like, okay, I'll get you guys some food. So first of all, she passes like one half of a water bottle through like the little bars, not really bars, it's like this little like window from the kitchen to the sunroom. So she like passes us this like half a water bottle. Me and T down that shit because we're dying in there. And then like a couple minutes later, she slides a paper plate in there and it's got like these little bits of chicken on it. And me and T were starving at that point, so we're like, okay, we're gonna eat this tuna. Like this is tuna fish, right? Actually, one tuna fish, bitch. We took a fucking bite of that. And I was like, something's weird. I spit it back out. And I looked at Jay and I was like, what was that? And this bitch goes, that was cat food. I'm sorry, you just gave me cat food to fucking eat. What? So I'm freaking the fuck out at this point. I'm like, let me the fuck out of this room now. Like, we're not even like really friends. Like, you need to let me out of this fucking room right the fuck now. And so she like walks away for a minute. And I'm just like looking at T and I'm like, yo, she's your friend. Like, you need to talk to her and like open this fucking door. So whatever, a couple minutes later, Jay comes back into the room. Or she opens the door and actually comes into the room. And she's like, all right, you guys can come out, but you need to follow me. So we follow her and she leads us like downstairs, which is through the kitchen, downstairs into the basement. And when we get down to the basement, she like brings us through this like creepy little hallway. And then like to the left is a laundry room. And then a little bit further down, there's like this little closet. And like, bro, when I tell you that it reminds me of the Coraline door, it was like one of those little tiny like square doors. So she opens it up. And she's like, all right, now you guys are going to get in here. And I'm like, whoa, wait, pause just for a fucking second. And I was like, why the fuck would I get in there? In my little kid way. I was like, why would I get in there? Why the heck would I get in there? I shit you not. She looked at me and T dead in our eyes and she said, this is where you guys are going to stay now. because I've always wanted my own human pets. I'm fucking sorry. Even as a little kid, that was enough for me. I grabbed T by her arm, like by the cuff of her fucking sleeve, dragged her ass up the stairs and ripped her out of the fucking house, and we rode our bikes back to her house where we dwelled on what happened and then literally never saw Jay again because apparently she moved to Washington, D.C. So yeah, she literally wanted to keep us as her fucking pet, and I honestly don't even know, like, what was going through her mind at the time, like, what she was thinking, what kind of psychosis she was under, but if she had been, like, a bulky, beefy girl, or, like, a boy, I definitely probably would have been shoved into a hole in somebody's basement. But I survived to tell the tale. And Jay, you're fucking weird, bitch.
I was 16, sitting on my couch, watching TV. Phone rings in the kitchen. It was one of the cordless landlines. You remember those? I ignore it. Stops ringing. Rings again. Annoys my sister, I guess, because she goes into the kitchen, grabs the phone, picks it up, comes into the living room where I'm at, sitting on the couch. She says that my friend wanted to talk to me, asked for me. Hands me the phone. I take it. Silence. Hello? Nothing. Weird. I hang up, set the phone down, keep watching TV. 20 minutes pass. Phone rings. Pick it up. But this time, I hear people talking. People. Two. And I'm listening to this. And I'm like, I feel like I'm eavesdropping. I feel like somebody butt dialed me. And now I'm just listening to this conversation. But you know me, I'm being a little bit devious. And I'm being real quiet and I'm listening to it. Trying to pick up on what it is they're saying. And it's just like, I'm talking about a co-worker, so like two women. And I feel like I recognize the voices, but whatever. Eventually, I kind of get bored and I'm just like, hello? Instantly hangs up. Okay, whatever. Set the phone down. Go back to watching TV. Another 20 minutes pass. My mom gets home. She comes into the living room where the door to the outside is, and my sister wanted to talk to her about something. So she goes in, they start talking, and I'm just sitting there watching TV. And they say something that just reminds us, I'm just like, what is this? And then I notice I've heard this conversation before. 20 minutes ago, on the phone. So I look at him and I tell him that, and they both stop and turn toward me. And my sister says, "You too?" Apparently, this had been happening to them for months. The phone would ring. It would either be no one or it would be someone talking. And then later, that conversation would happen. And then it stopped happening.
Get unready with me while I tell you about how I lived in the most haunted house and next to literal witches for 10 years. Let me explain. I moved to South Carolina when I was about 2 years old, and we found this really cute house at a really good price, and so we were like, hey, it's cold in the north, we need to move down south. This is a nice house, it was a nice neighborhood, and we were like, let's do it. This house seemed perfect at the time. It was big, it was pretty, the neighborhood was nice, there was a pool in the neighborhood, and the people around seemed really friendly, so everything was good. However, very quickly, we started realizing there was a lot of weird stuff happening at this house. Literally so many creepy things happened that I could probably make like 10 story times, but I'm gonna try to tell you guys just the most like interesting ones that I remember. Because again, when we moved here, I was 2 years old, so I don't really remember things happening until I was about 6. So the very first thing that happened, I don't remember because I was 2, but my family has like told me about. So apparently while we were literally like moving in, like bringing boxes into the house, my brother saw a woman standing in the laundry room. Obviously there was not an actual woman there. And my parents were like, okay, like stop making up stories. He was probably 8 at the time. And then my dad went on to see that exact same woman like 2 weeks later. I'm gonna go in chronological order of the things that I remember happening, but there's a lot, so I may have to make like more stories or more parts if y'all want to hear about all of it. Okay, so for the next story, I am 4 years old at this point, and my mom is a nurse. That's kind of a key detail here. So because she was a beginning nurse, they would give her really weird hours and really weird shifts. This happens to a lot of nurses when they first start. You get kind of the crappy shifts. Well, there was one point in time where she would get off of work at like 11, which was a really weird thing, and it was 11 at night. So I was asleep and my brother was asleep because, mind you, I was 4 and he was 10. So there was one point where my mom came home from a really late shift. It was like 11:30. Sorry, I like messed up my words. So me and my brother are both asleep upstairs, and the bathroom that we all share is the upstairs bathroom, and it is connected to my room. That's a key detail. We used this one because my parents slept upstairs for a lot of my life because me and my brother were young and they wanted to be near us in case we needed them. So we all used that bathroom. Well, my mom had gotten home from work and she went to go take a shower. And she said that she was in the shower and she kept hearing a little girl giggling, like right outside the shower. And she was not like tripping, like she knew what she heard. However, she wasn't like scared because she literally thought it was me because this bathroom was connected to my room and she thought I just like woken up and was like peeking in at her or something and like giggling. So she literally pulls the curtain and says, "Sadie, stop." And there's nobody there. That story is so creepy to me to this day because a little girl giggling while you're in the shower late at night and everybody's asleep? No. No. Okay, next one. I'm probably 7 at this point when we get some new neighbors. These people are so weird. Like, mind you, this is a normal neighborhood. These people were not normal. These people were the kind of people who did not keep up with their house at all, which, you know, sometimes that's just how it is. But these people, they would never come outside. Like, we never saw them outside, and they were self-proclaimed witches. They would practice witchcraft in their house. And if you're like, okay, let them do what they want, yeah, it's fine. That's their life. They can do that. But apparently when they got moved out of their house, it got foreclosed because I guess they weren't paying money for it. The, like, wood of the floor in the house, they had carved a pentagram in. Yeah. And we lived right next to them. Anyways, shortly after they moved in, and I don't know if any of this is connected to them, I'm just saying, like, they're over here casting spells, my house is super haunted. Maybe a correlation, I don't know. Also, we lived right next to a pond, and I know that, like, water has something to do with all of that. Again, I don't really know any of this. I'm just, like, what I've heard. Anyways, I was about 7 years old when this next thing started happening to me, my brother, and my dad. We would wake up every single night, and we would see in the corner of our room a dark, like, tall shadow man with a top hat and 2, like, white glowing eyes. This one scares me so much. I haven't seen this in years, but sometimes when I'm in bed at night, I'll look in my corner and I'll just be so scared that I will be seeing this thing because I saw it so much of my life as a kid. And me and my brother and my dad all saw it in that house for years. I don't know what it is. It never did anything. It just stood there and watched. Creepy. Okay, this one happens when I'm about 8 years old. So me and my brother had just gotten into a fight, like we were pushing each other, screaming, you know, sibling fights. And every time we would get into a fight, I would yell down the stairs for my mom to, like, tattle on him, obviously. So I remember we went to, like, the edge of, like, there was, like, a railing where the stairs was, but you couldn't see the downstairs because it kind of, like, curved and then went downstairs. So we would yell down the railing, but you couldn't see who was, like, standing on the downstairs, if that makes sense. This one, like, shakes me to my core to this day because we know what we heard. We yelled downstairs and we're like, "Mom, Mom, Mom, Mom," trying to get my mom. And she said, like, "Yes, like, what is it?" And we started explaining, like, what was going on. I was yelling, he was yelling. And then my dad is like, "What are y'all talking about?" And I'm like, "Dad, we're talking to Mom." We're talking to Mom. And he goes, "Mom left for work an hour ago." Me and my brother look at each other like we have just been like terrified. Like we look at each other like, because we heard my mom's voice yell to us. We were talking to my mom and she'd been gone. That is terrifying. Now buckle up, because this one is probably one of the scariest ones. So this one didn't happen to me, it happened to my brother, but we were both still pretty young. But at this point he was probably about 12 years old. So we had all gone to sleep for the night, and he was asleep in his room when he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, unable to move. So sleep paralysis is obviously what happened. He said that he was laying in his bed, he couldn't move, he couldn't scream, but he could see. Like his eyes were open and he was awake, but like his body, he couldn't move. Anyways, he says while this was happening, in the corner of his room, this like shadowy creature thing came up and like was towering over his bed, and it felt like, he said there was like a weight on his chest is what it felt like. Then he said that his bed started shaking. He said this went on for like 4 minutes before he could finally like scream and get up, and he ran straight to my parents' room. Obviously when he explained it to my parents, they were like, oh, you had sleep paralysis, you were probably dreaming, there's probably no one in your room, like this can happen. But he insisted that they went in there just to make sure and just to see for themselves. When they went in there, exactly the spots he said, the corner where the thing was, and then right over his bed, they said like the whole room was like probably like 70 degrees. When they walked in that spot, they said it was ice cold. The corner and the place by his bed where he said this thing was standing. Like, can you even imagine? Like, obviously something was there. And on top of that, the corner that the thing was standing in is the one closest to the witch's house. I don't know if that has anything to do with each other. Anyways, guys, there's so many more stories. Should I make a part 2? Because it gets so much crazier. I just realized I did not get unready this whole time. Sorry, guys, I got locked in.
All right, guys, I got another one from Rob. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, go check the last 5 videos I posted. I've been doing, I guess, what I could call a series by now. They are creepy search and rescue stories from a man who works as a search and rescue officer in Pennsylvania. And Rob's got a few more after this one, so buckle up. So you'll find in one of the past stories, we go over those creepy staircases in the middle of the woods. Rob talks about one of his first experiences with those. One of Rob's first search and rescue missions was to find a 4-year-old child who got lost in the woods. Rob said this was one of those cases where you just knew you were going to find the kid because the dogs picked up the scent right away and they were flying to find this kid. And they did, and he was fine. So on their way back from finding this kid, Rob's trainer suggests that they take a little detour. Apparently, there was this hot spot for where many of the lost people around that area end up. There was a little dip in the land, and I guess it's easier when people are lost to go down than to climb, so they all kind of funnel into that area. So it's about an hour, a few miles in, and they finally arrive at the spot, and she's pointing out different spots in that area where people often are. While they're looking, Rob in the distance notices something, and it's got straight edges, and he's like, what the heck is that? That's definitely not something organic. So rather than explain it to him, she just sort of lets him wander over on his own, and she just kind of hangs back and observes. Rob mentions that this area is state protected, and that means there can be no residential or commercial construction of any kind on this property. So Rob gets to about 20 feet away from this, and he says that all the hair on the back of his neck stands up, chills everywhere. There is a staircase sitting there, right in the middle of nowhere. He says in any other context, this would be a totally benign occurrence, but the fact that it is in the middle of nowhere, and it even had a beige carpet on the stairs, not on the sides, on the stairs. He said it looked like it was almost like a glitch in reality, where there should have been a house there and it glitched out and the staircase was left. This staircase is also not old and falling apart and dilapidated like you could claim it was from an old home and it's the last thing to deteriorate. It was like a nicely preserved set of stairs. And he looks at his trainer and he's like, what the hell is this doing out here? And she goes, get used to it, rookie. You're going to find a lot of them in this job. So Rob's like intrigued and he starts to move forward towards this thing and she grabs him by the arm hard. And she goes, I wouldn't do that. Her grip remains, and he's just staring at her dumbfounded. And she says again, you're gonna see them all the time, but do not go near them. Don't touch them. Don't go up to them. Just ignore them. And he wanted to start asking her more questions about it, but he could tell that the expression on her face said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. He says he dropped it and the subject never came up again during his training with her. He said, she was right though. About every 5th call Rob goes on, he says he finds a set of stairs. He says sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe like 2 or 3 miles. And other times they're like 20, 30, 40 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere. And he always finds them on his broadest searches on the weekends. And the weird thing is, he says they are usually in good condition, although some do look pretty weathered. He says they are all different kinds, all different sizes, and then he remembers one that was very distinct. He said that the biggest one he ever saw looked like it came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion. He said this thing was at least 10 feet wide, and it stretched and arced up to almost 15 or 20 feet high. Just the stairs, though. No other remnants of any other part of a building. And he reiterates, anyone he's ever tried to talk about them to always act like, don't worry about it, no big deal, just don't go near it, don't go up them. So Rob says now that he has trainees of his own, he just kind of goes over the same spiel with them. But he doesn't quite understand it. He says that he really hopes someday he gets a better answer, but as of right now, it hasn't happened yet. I've seen some of you in the comments on the other video about this saying that it's just creepypasta, but I have seen so many stories from different people, all walks of life, talking about these staircases. So just because it was on creepypasta doesn't mean it can't have some truth to it. Let me know your thoughts, and don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
I have the creepiest story to tell you. I was so scared that I had to sleep with my light on last night. So there was this woman who was in a long-term relationship with this guy who was an only child, and he passes away. So at this point, there's nobody to take care of his elderly mum. She gets a new job and she ends up having to move away, but she has this massive guilt about the fact that she has left his mum on her own and she has no other family to help take care of her. And not only that, but her partner had had this big Alsatian dog, and her partner passed away. That dog actually became the mum's rather than hers. The dog was like the only link that this woman still had to her son, and it was also like her only companion. Before she moves away, she does make sure that his mum is moved to a ground floor apartment, and she also makes sure that she has somebody to walk the dog several times a week. It just so happens that the guy who manages this new place where she's living has his own dogs, and so he says, I can do that for you. And she's like, brilliant. Every time she would speak to the old lady, she seemed to be really grateful for the help that this guy was giving her. Actually, she feels like she can stop going there as much to visit, and so she does. She kind of takes a back seat. Well, eventually the lady passes away, and at this point she has to go there and help clean out the flat, and she would actually come face to face with this manager again. And when she does, she is horrified because this man is head to toe in her late boyfriend's clothes. She tries to tell herself it could just be a coincidence, they're around the same age, or maybe, just maybe, her ex-mother-in-law had in fact gifted those clothes, and if that's the case, what was it to do with her? She had moved away after all. She tells the man that she would like to take him for dinner just to say thank you for everything that he had done for them, and he accepts. And when they're out for dinner that night, he kind of does explain that, yeah, the clothes are your ex's. I hope you don't find that weird. It hadn't even crossed his mind that he would be wearing them the first time they would come face to face again. It wasn't just the clothes, because even some of his mannerisms were very similar to that of her ex. At some point, she asked if she would be able to see Zeus, because the entire time she's been back, she has not seen this man with the dog at all. And he tells her, yeah, no problem. I will bring Zeus around tomorrow and you can spend the day with him. Next day, she expects this man to knock on the door with the dog, but he never comes. And then he sends her a message later that night saying, I'm really sorry, I ended up taking Zeus out early on a maintenance call, and I'm around tonight if you want to get dinner, and I will bring Zeus. And she can't do that night, so she replies to tell him as much. And when he replies, he asks, is she going on a date? So at this point, to avoid any awkwardness, she just comes out and says, I actually do have a boyfriend, so no, I'm not going on a date, I'm seeing a friend, but just in case you thought there was something that could happen here, I'm just letting you know I have a boyfriend. And after that, he just doesn't reply, and so she thinks like that is the end of that. She goes out that night for dinner, and when she comes back to the old lady's apartment where she's still staying, she is like going through her suitcase so that she can find herself some pajamas, and that is when she realizes that the inside of her case is soaking wet. Not only is it wet, there is like a pungent smell of urine. It's as if somebody has weed into her case. The only thing that she can think to do is call the maintenance man, and when she calls his phone, she hears the phone ringing from within the apartment. She is inside this apartment on her own with the doors locked. She grabs what she can grab and she runs out of that apartment. She drives to her friends and she stays there for the night. In the morning, she gets a call from the maintenance man, which she's too scared to answer. This man is like horrified to hear what has happened, and he says he dropped Zeus to the apartment and then he had picked up Zeus later that night, and that he had actually ended up leaving his phone inside the apartment, and then when he had called her in the morning she hadn't answered, he had worried there was something wrong, so he let himself in. That's how he's managing to call her now. Friend, she's like completely convinced by this guy, and so she tells her friend, like, I think you were just paranoid and it's fine, he sounds like a nice guy, I think you should go back there. She listens to her friend, she goes back there, and she ends up finishing up clearing everything, but she cannot find any of the old videos of her and her partner that she really had wanted to take with her, and so she just writes it off and thinks they must have been lost in the move at some point. While she's cleaning out the flat, she does come across this little like shoebox type thing, and inside was a plastic bag, and in that plastic bag were ashes. She cannot for the life of her work out what these ashes would be from, because her boyfriend hadn't been cremated. It is until she's at the old lady's funeral and somebody comes over and asks, is she going to be buried with Zeus's ashes? Zeus was dead. And just as this woman finds out that that was not dog wheat in her suitcase, he walks into the funeral head to toe in her dead ex's clothes. She never finds the videos of her and her ex, and so she feels like he had watched those videos and kind of like studied how her ex moved and then copied it. And he was in the apartment when she came home that day by herself. Imagine she never called his phone. He would have just been like, what, in a cupboard? My worst nightmare.
You've probably heard of some boys thinking no means yes, but have you ever heard of a guy thinking no means come outside of my house, stare at me through my window, and stand around for an hour? Just me? Oh, okay. Story time on how I rejected this guy and he showed up outside of my house. Okay. Also, this is fake. I don't support businesses that don't like my people, but my business likes everyone, so you should check it out. Anyway, so this happened a couple months ago, and I was gonna tell the story immediately, but I didn't want to encourage him to keep bothering me. So I've known this guy ever since 8th grade. Yeah, it's been a while. And honestly, I had a crush on him for a little bit. And to no surprise, he liked me back. So we started talking, but after a while, he started like being like really weird and inappropriate. I was like, sorry, but that's like a big ick for me. Like, I don't like that. So I was like, okay, I think we should break up. Because it's been 2 weeks, and why are you saying... I wanna put you in 7th position for 70 minutes. Side note, I don't know why I was getting so much play when I look like this. So we break up, and then over the course of the next couple months, he won't stop texting me. It was like, oh, you can't be my friend. No, like what? He kept saying like, oh, we can come outside, like you can hang out. Why would I want to hang out with you? Even though that we weren't talking like trying to be a couple anymore, he kept sending me inappropriate stuff. I'm not gonna say what those things were because it was disgusting, but I'm pretty sure if you use your imagination, you can probably clock what I'm thinking. I literally said, I'm uncomfortable with the way you're talking to me. It was like, okay, my bad. And then 2 days later, he sends me a reel saying that, oh, I do stuff to your pictures. What the fuck? Why would I ever be like, oh goody? Who would ever want to hear that from a stranger at this point? So I go to high school, I get a boyfriend, and I post him on my story, so I guess he's like, he's chilling. Soon as me and that dude are done, guess who shows back up? Hey Lauryn, I just want to know why we stopped talking. Cause you're a freak. So the cycle starts again. He keeps sending me reels, he keeps sending me inappropriate messages, and I'm like not entertaining. Like, okay, you're making me uncomfortable. He's telling me like, oh, you want to come outside, we could do something real. Get the freak out of my phone right now. One time he asked me to come outside again, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to say that? This time the message follows, look outside. You mean mi casa? Outside mi casa? Ma maison? Why I need to look out there for? I see him circling around and just looking inside my house. Now I'm scared because what the freak are you doing outside in my house? This dude has been making me feel unsafe and uncomfortable for a while, but I didn't tell anyone, like my parents or anything, because I felt embarrassed. I know a lot of young girls watch me, so here's a PSA. If a man is comfortable with making you uncomfortable, he is capable of so much more. Lesson learned. At this point, like, I'm creeped out. Like, I'm like, what the freak is going on? So I tell my mom, because I know if I tell my dad, texting him right now, I was like, I'm telling my mom, like, you're so creepy, like, what are you doing? My mom goes out and checks and he's gone. So my dad is like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Like, why are you guys looking outside? So I eventually tell him a couple of days later, and he was like, yeah, if you would have told me at that moment and I saw him outside, something would have happened. Moral of the story is, don't let things carry on for too long, because they'll get an inch and they'll give it a mile. Anyway, that's the end of the story, hopefully. Make sure you go check out my business. Okay, so plug it. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Former 911 operator, I don't share these stories to scare you, but to prepare you. Parents, this is the kind of interaction can turn into a headline really quick if your teen ignored the signs. Mom sent me a DM about her 17-year-old daughter. She'd taken her dog to a dog park, just the two of them. Nobody else was around. She took her dog off leash, playing in a shallow creek. And then out of nowhere, a man walked up, out of the woods behind her. He looked like his mid to late 40s. He said, "Hey, who's that pretty dog?" She said, "Thanks." And he asked how old the dog was, and she told him just a little over a year. And he says, "Oh, he's still a puppy. He won't hurt anyone." She told her mom in that exact moment she got the worst gut feeling she had ever had in her life. She said, "No, he's pretty protective over me." Called her dog back to her to put him back on a leash. The man says, "Oh, come here, puppy. Let me pet you." And she yelled, "Waylon, come now." And luckily, the dog ran right to her and stood by her side. She hurried, she clipped the leash, said, have a good day, and walked towards the car, fast. And the man stood there smiling with an evil grin. The second she got to the car, she FaceTimed her mom crying. She said, "Mom, I have never felt anything like that before. That man was evil. I could feel it." She has not been back to the state park since. Remember that your gut is faster than your brain. Teach your kids to act on it immediately, just like she did. Distance is safety. Create. Space first, analyze later. If someone is trying to call your dog away from you, that is a massive red flag. This could have ended so differently. Thank you for letting me share your story.
We have an Appalachian Mountains story on our hands. So I was listening to one of my favorite spooky story podcasts, and I came across this one, and it was pretty spooky. This guy says that he went to college at Appalachian State, and for fun, he didn't really like to go to bars or to go drinking, but he loved to go to abandoned places and just kind of roam around and explore. So he says that there was some sort of cave that was underneath a bridge, and he had been there before, the year prior. Nothing spooky really happened. So he had told his friends, "You know what, this place is kind of cool, we should go." His friends are like, "Okay, yeah, let's go." They are going under there. He says that it's so tight to get in. They have to like shimmy their way in there. First of all, I have claustrophobia. It ain't happening. So anyways, they get there, and he says that off the bat, he noticed that it was very different this time. There was so many different markings, pentagram markings, and it looked like someone had some sort of seance in there. Again, that wasn't there the year prior. Nonetheless, they continue on their little tour, and they're going deeper and deeper, and right above, they go into this crawl space to get to the next area. Right above that crawl space, it says he's in there, and it's pointing in the direction that they're going. Of course, people always do and say spooky things, so he didn't think much of it. Him and his friends are like, "Are you still down?" And they were down. They are going into that crawl space to go into the next space, and all he has is a flash to his iPhone. There's a few of them, about 3 of them. So they are crawling in there, and as we know, the flash to our phones cannot reach that far. So he saw some sort of shadow, and he didn't know what it was. So he was like, "Okay, what was that?" He asks his friend for his flashlight because he had an actual flashlight. He shines it, and he sees this really weird creature. He says he's never seen anything like this before. He's also never seen a giraffe, but you know what a giraffe would look like. And he had never seen anything similar to this. And as soon as they shine the light to him or to it, it literally started bouncing towards them, like off the walls, in no specific direction, just going. Obviously, they book it. They are out. They're like, "You know what, forget this." And they're out of there. They end up talking to each other, and they're like, "Okay, we all saw the same thing. What do you think that was?" No one had any type of explanation. That next morning, the person that's telling the story says that he is taking a shower. He's brushing his teeth in the shower, and out of nowhere, he spits out like this clot of blood. That had never happened before. Later that day, he meets with one of the friends that went with him into that cave, and the first thing that he says was, "Hey, you know what's weird? I spit out like a clot of blood today." And they were like, okay, we have to talk to the third person that was with us and literally the same exact thing happened to him. He doesn't like to talk about the story. 1, because he's scared. 2, he has a feeling that not a lot of people will believe him. But it is so crazy, the lore and the secrecy of what happens in the Appalachian Mountains, because we literally have no idea what is truly going on in there and what any of this is. They ended up doing some sort of research, and he ended up coming up with some sort of demon. That it was a demon that was called to protect that area. Nonetheless, he doesn't like to talk about it, but isn't this scary? Like, I don't know, the Appalachian Mountains just freak me out. Listen to the story on the podcast called Radio Rental. So spooky. If you guys have not heard about that podcast, I highly suggest it. And if you guys have any spooky stories, make sure that you send them.
For years, my dad has been making fun of me, like, oh, do you remember when you thought there was like a man living in our attic? Remember, you used to make me check the attic all the time, so you'd be like, I hear voices up in the attic, and like da da da, and it was so annoying. And then eventually I just lied and was like, oh, I think the pipes are picking up radio waves, so he'd stop asking me to go check in there. And he thinks it's a funny little story about like a bout of childhood anxiety and like paranoia or whatever. And every single time I'm like, no, Dad, because there was a homeless man living in the woods across the street. And he's like, no, there wasn't. And so yesterday I was on FaceTime with my dad and my brother, because he's visiting my dad right now, and it got brought up where he was like, remember when you thought there was a man living in the attic? And I was like, okay, there probably wasn't a man living in the attic, but there was a man living in the woods, and that's why I was worried about a man living in the attic. And then Max is like, no, I think that like the girl across the street was just telling tall tales and you just believed her. And I was like, no, like I remember that it happened, like her family was like really freaked out by it, and they installed all these cameras because they found a man swimming in their pool when they came home from work unexpectedly. And they're like, no, like we would have known about that. That would have been a huge deal. Because like, mind you, I grew up in Austin, but I grew up like 30 minutes outside of the city. So it would be super random for somebody to be all the way out there, especially because we were the first house in our neighborhood. So it was like all undeveloped land at that point. It was just like coyotes and like wild hogs and like woods. And I was like, yeah, everyone did know about it. Like, Dad, I don't know how you didn't know about it. Like, you were working a lot during that time, but like everyone definitely did know about it. And they were like, no, like you're imagining things like that. And I was like, fuck you guys, and added my mom to the FaceTime. And I was like, Mom, was there or was there not a homeless man living in the woods? And she was like, oh yeah, there was. Like, that was like a whole thing. And my brother was like, what? There was a homeless man living in the woods, like actually? And I was like, dude, I've been saying that for years. And she was like, yeah, it was like a whole thing. You know, they installed a ton of cameras, built the fence, like they were really freaked out by it. And I was like, boom, see, I freaking told you. Like, I don't know why you didn't believe. It was like, why were we playing outside in the woods then? And I was like, see, I was the only one taking it seriously. I was like, dude, don't go in the woods without me. You might get taken by the man in the woods. And he thought I was just trying to scare him. Like, older siblings will be like, try and scare their little siblings, or like do pranks like, you know, you're adopted, like, you know, things like that. He thought I was pulling one of those, and I was like, no, I was actually afraid of the man in the woods. And like around this same time, one of my other friends from elementary school who lived in like a totally different part of the city, they had found a man living in secret in her attic because he had been eating food out of their pantry. And then they eventually found out there was a man living in her attic, and it was like within like the same like 2-year span of this happening. So then I was terrified that there was a man living in our attic, because the attic was above my bedroom. So anytime I would hear any noise, like whether it was like a bat or something that got trapped in the attic, I was like, oh my god, there's probably a man living in our attic. And only yesterday was I finally vindicated. And my dad was like, oh my god, like I just thought that you had like a creepy imaginary friend or something. My brother's like, I can't believe there was just a man in the woods. And I was like, that's what I'm saying. I was the only one appropriately freaked out.
They say that you're not supposed to see your own doppelganger, right? And that it's supposed to be a bad omen, or something bad could happen to you afterwards. Well, someone in my family saw their own doppelganger, and this story is terrifying. It's one of the scariest stories that I've heard any of my family members tell. But if you guys saw the story that I posted like 2 or 3 nights ago about my mom's doppelganger, what's so crazy about this story is that it happened to my mom's twin sister's daughter. So it's important to note that a lot of people in my family have seen things. A lot of people in my family have gifts. What to the extent of those gifts, I'm not sure, but everyone has seen something or heard something at some point. My aunt has sleep paralysis horribly. She has her entire life, my mom's twin sister. And she lived in this house at one point, and this house used to freak me out so bad. Now, I never personally saw anything anything in this house, but I would always have nightmares in this house, and I would never want to go in the basement alone because the basement just freaked me out. So one night, my aunt puts my niece to bed, puts my nephew to bed, and then she goes to sleep. So after my aunt falls asleep, she wakes up in the middle of the night, and she starts to hear what sounds like a radio changing stations. And this is freaking her out a little bit, but then she realizes that she cannot move, and she realizes that she's having sleep paralysis. Now, what's so creepy about this is that numerous times this has happened to me. The first thing I will hear when I'm about to have a full-blown sleep paralysis attack is I will hear what sounds like a radio changing stations. So she hears this, and then suddenly she starts to feel something crawl slowly on the bed. First it's hands, then it feels like the knees, and then she can hear this laughing sound, but it's like this deep maniacal laugh. It slowly inches closer towards her. It gets right in her ear, and it goes, Anne. Anne is my aunt's name. So at this point, she's freaking out. Her husband is sleeping next to her, and she's trying her hardest to move. She cannot move. She's trying to wake him up, making any sound she can. She cannot move. As she's trying to fight her way out of this as hard as she can, she suddenly feels whatever this is leap out of her bed, jump on the floor, and run down the hallway. She finally gets out of it, and she sits up, and she's like gasping for air, like literally terrified her. Even though it was just sleep paralysis, she was like, that just felt real. There was something wrong about that. Now down the hall is my cousin's room, my little cousin's room. We're just gonna call her Mackenzie, and she was 6 years old at the time. She ends up falling back asleep, and nothing happens for the rest of that night, but she does know that she feels like there's something in that house. A couple nights later, she puts my niece and nephew to bed. She goes back to sleep. She wakes up at like 3 o'clock in the morning again, and she hears my cousin screaming at the top of her lungs. So my aunt goes to get out of bed while my cousin, I keep almost calling her my niece, is running down the hallway, tears pouring down her face. She is absolutely hysterical. My aunt is like, what is wrong? What's wrong? And this is what my cousin tells her. My cousin said that she was laying in bed. She woke up in the middle of the night, and she got scared for no reason. She then looks down at the end of her bed, and she sees something sitting at the end of her bed. At first, she's looking at it, and she's like, is my mom in the room? Is my mom sitting in the bed? She thought that it was my aunt at first. And then it turns its head slowly towards her, and it's her sitting at the end of the bed. She sees herself sitting at the end of the bed. And when it turned its head, it just smiled at her like this. So she saw herself sitting at the end of her bed, just smiling at her. A day after my aunt had that sleep paralysis where that thing ran down the hall towards her room. Now, they did end up moving out of that house, and my aunt was absolutely horrified by this because she believed her. My mom believed me every time I told her something happened to me when I was younger, and my aunt always believed her kids too. And they ended up moving out of the house, not for that reasons, but just because they ended up moving out. Like, she ended up getting a divorce from her husband. My aunt said that she would always have crazy nightmares in that house. And when I say crazy, like, I'm talking about nightmares that kind of seeped into reality. I'll have to ask her about some, like, this one particular nightmare that she had that still gives me chills when I hear it to this day. I'm getting chills right now even thinking about it. It was so scary, and the way that she woke up from it, and just like it was so, oh. But I'll make sure to ask her about that if you want to hear it. Drop it in the comments if you want to hear that story. But what do you guys think is going on? Like, this was a while ago, obviously. But I definitely think that my entire family has gifts to a certain extent. Most of them have seen pretty freaky things. I definitely think that a lot of us are haunted. I think I have it the worst. My whole family thinks that I have it the worst. But I just want to know your thoughts on this. What do you think this was? I think we all know what it was. I just can't say the name. Like, obviously, we know what it was. It may have not been a doppelganger. It probably sounds like the other thing. But drop all your thoughts, opinions, and suggestions in the comments below. Before we go into the shoutouts, I do have to ask you guys for a favor. Those of you who have told me stories before and I have not responded to you, do me a favor if you guys have time and resend in those stories, because I am noticing that there are a lot of stories that I'm seeing in my email that I have missed, and for some reason my email is only letting me go so far back, and so I think I'm missing a lot of stories. So definitely resend me an email if I never responded to you, or if I did respond to you and I told you I was going to tell you your story and I didn't. And one more thing, I did tell this story on my account. It was like the third story that I ever told before, but I did not tell you the whole story. I did not tell you about my aunt's sleep paralysis story because I did not remember the sleep paralysis story until recently. That's actually why I'm retelling the story now. I did tell you in the story that she had sleep paralysis, but I didn't realize that it was so close together, and I didn't remember the sleep paralysis story specifically. So you're getting like an extra part of the story. just like the last one. One last thing that's really important. I did find a site where I can pick a family to help for Christmas. And so I already created the GoFundMe and everything, but I want to pick the specific family so you guys know exactly where the donations are going to. And I just am going to Florida for Christmas. So the family might have to be in Florida. That's the only thing that's like tripping me up right now, is like to do it in Brooklyn, to do it in Florida. I don't know if I'm gonna have to like actually present gifts or send them money or how that works. So I'm gonna figure that all out tomorrow. I know it's late in the game, but I'm trying my best. And now we're gonna do my favorite part, which is the shout outs. Sissy020314. You said that you and your son watch my stories all the time, your 7-year-old son. So I thought that I would give you and your 7-year-old son a shout out. Thank you so much. I love it when family members or friends or relatives watch my stories together, or partners. I think that is so great. That's why I tell these stories. Like, I love it when it brings people together. So that makes me so happy to hear when that happens. So thank you for telling me that. Hi to your son. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my stories. It means so much to me. I hope they don't scare you too much. They probably won't that much anymore. But, and thank you for mom for watching my stories and for sharing them with your son. And I appreciate it so much, and I love you both. And thank you so much for being spooky babies. Not_underscore dermatologist. I cannot remember if I gave you a shout out before, but if I did, I'm giving you one again. I don't think that I did. Thank you so much. You are so sweet. You said that you love being a spooky baby and that you love watching my stories, and that means so much to me. I love that you are a spooky baby as well, and I love that you love watching my stories. Thank you so much for being a part of my community, and thank you for being kind, and thank you for supporting me. That means so much to me when people are kind and support me and leave comments and push out my videos. It really does. Like, it just makes my whole day. So your comment made my whole day. I loved seeing that you said that you loved being a spooky baby, and I just love you. My name is Kajsa, and I tell your paranormal experiences on here every single night, or the ones that you recommend to me from the paranormal world. So if you're into that, hit that follow button. And I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? Keep sending me your scary stories. Have a safe night. And what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much. See you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
Just remembered a scary story that my childhood friend's mom told me. It's super scary, and I just thought I'd share it real quick, okay? So her mom was telling us about how when she was a child, she lived in the Philippines. I'm not going to give any more information than that, but she grew up in the Philippines, and there was like a house on the end of the street that all of the kids were terrified of, and it was an empty house. But all the kids were super scared. They said it was like a haunted house, that bad things happened there, blah, blah, blah. So one day, her and her friends, being brave and bored, they wanted to go explore it. So they work up the courage, they open the front door, and it's creepy, but it's empty. She said it was like a little bit messy. There were spider webs, you know, kind of what you expect of a creepy, empty house. Okay, so she said that she was in a group of like 4 or 5 kids, and all the other kids were older than her, and they wanted to go explore more into the house, but she was too afraid. So they were like, okay, yeah, whatever, you can just wait here by the front door and we're gonna go explore. So she's just in the entryway. The front door is behind her. Straight ahead of her is a stairway that goes up to the 2nd floor, and I think she said to the left went into a kitchen, and then to the right went into the living room, and the other kids had went into the living room area. So she's just standing in the entranceway, and she hears footsteps on the stairwell, but nobody went up the stairs. They were still on the 1st floor. So she's freaking out. She's waiting. She's looking up at the stairs. She's little too, like she's really young, so she doesn't really have any like survival instinct. So she's watching to see what is making these steps on the stairwell. They're slowly coming down. She hears it. She said it went really slow, like dunk, dunk, dunk. Like each step was like painful, like one at a time. Finally, she can see what's walking down the steps, and it is a doll. It is a 3-foot doll. Do you remember those? The 3-foot plastic dolls? Yeah. So it's a doll, and its legs are stiff. It can't even bend its legs, and it's going thunk, 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 down each step, coming down the stairs towards her. When she told me that, I damn near lost my mind. So as she starts screaming, she freaks out, she runs out. Everyone else in there starts screaming. They all leave. Moral of the story, they never go back, obviously. So yeah, a plastic doll, a 3-foot plastic doll, come to life, can't even bend its legs, and thunking down the stairs. No thanks. No thanks. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.
This story deals with a possible timeline jump. It came from someone named Elizabeth, and she says, I drowned when I was 15 and I still remember every detail 15 years later. She says, I know how impossible that sounds, but I can't make sense of what happened to me. She said today she's 37 years old, but this happened when she was 15 in 2003, and she can still remember every detail vividly as if it happened yesterday. I thought she wrote this in a very eloquent way, and so I'm going to read you this story word for word as opposed to putting it in my own words because I want to make sure that I get every detail correct. This is what she said. Every summer, my dad would take my brother Derek and I to our grandparents' house, my dad's parents, to swim in their backyard. They had a pretty big in-ground pool that had been around as long as I can remember. Over the years, it became somewhat of a routine. Whenever school let out for summer vacation, Derek and I would spend a few weekends at their house to enjoy the summer and make use of their pool as much as we could. They had a curling slide that required a ladder, as it was roughly 12 feet tall, and a diving board near the deep end of the pool. To us, it was better than going to a water park because it was private, secluded, and fenced in. Pretty much a dream come true for any kid who loved to do a cannonball from a running start. I should preface this by saying Derek and I were, and are still, excellent swimmers. It was in that very pool I learned how to swim as a kid and kept improving the more time we spent there. The day in question was just like any other. Derek had just gotten out of the pool to dry off and resume playing Pokemon on his Game Boy. There were pool chairs and tables lined up on the side, and I distinctly remember Derek sitting on the far corner as I stepped up to the diving board. Before I jumped in, I remember looking at the sky and seeing storm clouds approaching. They were exceptionally dark in some areas, so I figured I'd take one more dive before it started to rain. I jumped in, hit the bottom of the pool, and remembered inhaling from impact, maybe a natural reaction at the time. I'm still not sure why I recall doing that. I wasn't an idiot when it came to swimming and never had any issues diving before. When I opened my eyes, I half expected to find myself coughing up water at the surface, but I didn't. I didn't see anything except darkness. Not just darkness, but pure, unfiltered black in every direction. I distinctly remember thinking, that's weird, are my eyes still closed? I reached out my hand but couldn't see it. I felt myself moving and even felt myself blinking at one point, but I still couldn't see anything, which in hindsight should have freaked me out. But it didn't. In fact, it was the calmest and most relaxed I'd ever felt in my life. It felt like I was floating, but there was no weight to my body, at least not that I remember. I could still feel the sensation of my arms and legs, but I didn't feel anything beneath me, and I accepted it without any fear or worry. I didn't feel any pain, I didn't feel an ounce of fear, but I remember thinking, or maybe even saying out loud, so, this is what death feels like? Feels kind of nice if it is. I can't remember the last time I ever felt so calm. It was half a joke, half acceptance. The sensation of floating without a care in the world lasted for what only felt like a few minutes. Long enough to take in every sensation and notice how odd it was that I couldn't see any part of myself, no matter how many times I put my hands out in front of me. Suddenly, all the blackness started flickering pink and red in the distance. It was subtle at first, but then that's all I could see, a reddish pink glow, and that's when my eyes actually started to hurt. All I can say about what happened next is that I felt like all the pain and fear I should have been feeling hit me all at once. My throat hurt, my stomach hurt, my head hurt, my eyes hurt, and I could feel my body laying on a rough, hard surface. I opened my eyes, remembering how odd it was that I suddenly could. When I did, I didn't see black anymore. I saw bright blue in almost every direction, which I eventually realized was the sky directly above me. There were no clouds, no storm approaching, nothing. It was a normal, regular, sunny summer day, except I wasn't in the pool anymore, and Derek wasn't in the chair with his Game Boy. I coughed up some water, but not nearly as much as I expected. And aside from that, the rest of me was completely dry. I was lying on the side of the pool, maybe an arm's length away. I started wondering how on earth I'd managed to get myself out of the water, not to mention how long I'd been lying there in the sun. Suddenly, I heard the screen door behind me open. It was Derek, looking half concerned and half relieved. From what I recall in the haze of confusion, Derek had gone to find an adult, and they eventually came out only to find me very much alive and not in need of medical assistance. Derek asked if I was okay, and I reassured him I was. Physically, I felt fine, as if I'd only swallowed a mouthful of pool water. I'm not gonna lie, a small part of me was pissed off for going from such an extreme sense of calm to absolute disorientation and confusion within a matter of minutes. When I asked my brother what happened, he seemed just as confused as I was. In a split second, Derek went from looking as concerned as anyone should be after watching their sibling drown to confused and annoyed that I was even asking questions. Now, if it wasn't weird already, here's where it gets very strange. She says, the fact that there were no clouds in the sky, let alone the dark impending storm clouds I distinctly remember, was already weird enough to make me uneasy. I don't know how else to explain it, but it almost felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. It felt off, but only in subtle ways at first. It was only after I realized the time on the clock was different from the last time I saw it that I started to feel extremely uneasy. I remember taking the final dive in the late afternoon around 4 or 5 p.m. However, now the clock showed just past 11:30 a.m. I felt like I was either going crazy or had had one of the most vivid visceral dreams of my entire life. And over the years, I tried to ignore it, but there hadn't been a year of my life since that day where I haven't thought about it. It was impossible to explain that phenomenon without sounding insane. That is, until I heard one of your stories about a girl who went on a trip and suddenly remembered everyone around her disappearing. Her account of looking everywhere for her friends, only to find them back at their cabin, acting as if she hadn't been missing for an entire day, compelled me not only to share this story with you, but also start piecing together some of the missing parts on my own. At that time, I wasn't aware of the multiverse theory, time jumps, glitches in the Matrix, or anything of the sort. But now that I've heard more stories of people having similar experiences, I can't help but question whether that period of floating in darkness was me slipping into the nearest timeline. Not everything matches the original, of course, but it's close enough not to make me feel like an outsider in my own life story. When I heard about the story of that girl on that trip, it made every memory of that day come flooding back. I decided right then and there to call my brother and ask him directly if he ever remembered me drowning when we were teenagers at Grandma's pool. I'd already warned him beforehand that what I was about to ask him was going to sound insane, but to please go with me on this. He paused for a moment on the phone and said, no, I think I'd remember something as traumatic as my sister drowning right in front of me. But the thing is, in that previous timeline, he did watch me drown. He was the only other person in the area when it happened. It's a detail I will never forget as long as I live. I can't remember which adults were in the house when it happened, but there was definitely some kind of supervision. The adults, like my grandparents, would usually be in the living room whenever we swam, only occasionally coming outside to check if we needed anything. The majority of the pool was visible from there. A large sliding glass door took up more than half the wall, so making sure we were okay usually didn't require more than a quick glance. Even when the glass door was closed, the pool was close enough to hear anyone outside. I know full well that none of the adults in that house would have left Derek and I unsupervised, no matter how much trust they had in us or how skilled we were at swimming. Which begs the question, why was nobody else except Derek there before I jumped off the diving board? Maybe they were inside and I just couldn't see them. Or maybe the one time they trusted us to be fine was the one time everything went horribly wrong. My brother was slightly skeptical at first when I told him, but he started believing me more and more with every new detail I shared. I told him what game he'd been playing, the color of his Game Boy, the color of his swimming trunks, everything I recalled, looking only moments before jumping into the pool checked out. He said he remembers the game, the Game Boy, even the shorts, but doesn't remember me drowning. When I told him about hearing your story about the girl on the trip, he admitted it seemed possible. I may have jumped timelines. He seemed pretty deep in thought as he processed it. I told him, you do realize that if I drown in that timeline and you watch it happen, it means you're an only child somewhere, right? That seemed to really hit him. My brother and I are extremely close, only 17 months apart, and always have been. He said the thought of watching me drown would have undoubtedly left him scarred and traumatized, enough for it to, quote, likely do something stupid later on just to escape all the guilt. Which, of course, breaks my heart. It scares me to think that my brother might have done that, wherever that timeline exists. But between all the constant migraines he gets on the right side of his head and the Mandela effects we both share, it wouldn't surprise me if he left that timeline of his own accord only to wind up in this one with me. It's a reach, of course, but it was an interesting theory to discuss as we dove headfirst into this crazy rabbit hole of uncertainty. She ended her email by saying, I apologize if this was long-winded, and I'm aware that this might sound completely insane, but maybe, much like how the story of the girl on the trip helped me put the story into words, this will help someone else who's experienced something similar. Thanks for reading. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what to make of this story, but I do find it totally interesting. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing this. I hope there's someone out there who can shed some light or a similar experience. What I'm noticing about stories like this is there are so many people that are starting to come forward and talk about what they believe to be a glitch in the Matrix or a slip in a timeline. And as we're learning more about the time-space continuum and them firing up the CERN particle accelerator, it just begs the question, is it possible for us to slip into other timelines, especially when it comes to avoiding death?
Story time about the time I met a predator while I was working alone. For a little backstory, I work at a kiosk at a mall. It's the kind of kiosk that's like a square, so I'm in the middle and people can walk all around the outside. But because of this, there's no back rooms, I don't have any coworkers, I'm all by myself all the time, which is usually fine, but in a case like this story also takes place my first week working, so I was pretty nervous still, and I was still trying to be extra nice to customers because I was new. This night in particular, it's like 5 p.m, there's not many people in the mall. I noticed this guy looking at the chocolates in my display case for a pretty long time. I don't think much of it, a lot of people come and stop and look at what I have to sell, but I was aware of him because he was there for a while and he did keep glancing at me. But he leaves and I don't see him for about an hour when he comes back. Again, he's looking at the chocolates in the display case for a really long time, but he keeps looking up at me, so I keep thinking he needs help. But every time I ask, he's like, no, I'm good. But he continues to like look at me more than the chocolate. Eventually he does pick a chocolate and he comes to pay. And most people, while they're paying, you know, they look at their money, they look at what they're doing. But for him, he was just staring into my soul the entire time he was doing the transaction. So I was already like kind of thrown off by this. Like, what are you doing, sir? And it only goes downhill from here. Also, I forgot to mention, this guy is like 40. Like, he could be my father. He's like bald and very clearly at least twice my age. He finishes paying and I think he's gonna be on his merry way because I'm already like, all right, that's enough, you can leave now. But instead, he looks me dead in the eye and goes, "Would you like to get together with me sometime?" He said it very softly and very like, almost slyly. I don't know how to describe it. Just never heard someone speak like that who had good intentions. Like, people don't normally speak like how he was talking to me. Also, what? Why would you ask that to someone who looks like a minor? So maybe my customer servicey self was like, I'm all set. Have a great day. Partially because I was so caught off guard and partially because I was scared. So I think he's gonna leave now because what else could you have to say? You just got rejected. And he goes, "I get the feeling I'm making you uncomfortable." And I kind of just laughed like, like, yes, you are. And you'd think if a normal person felt like they were making someone uncomfortable, they would, you know, stop. They would leave. They would evacuate. But no, why would he do that? So now he's just standing back a little bit from the register, just, again, watching me, kind of eyeing me up and down. And he goes, "I bet you get a lot of attention from guys working at a place like this, don't you?" I was like, no, not really. Like, what? But he doesn't stop there. He then proceeds to say, "Well, dressed like that, every guy's thinking about your body, even if he doesn't come and say it." I literally could not believe my ears. Like, I thought I heard him wrong. And for reference, I was wearing a t-shirt and long pants. This was my outfit. Like, you cannot see anything. Finally, he's getting ready to leave. And as his final goodbye, he decides to place the chocolate he bought very intentionally back on the counter and walks away. At the time, I thought he was doing this so he had an excuse to come back and harass me later because he forgot it. But now I think he was just doing it more as a statement of like, yeah, I didn't want this anyways. I was only coming over just to harass you. I only came over here to ask you out. Although he didn't actually do anything to me, I was so scared by this interaction. And I just felt so disgusting because I knew he was just looking at me like meat the whole time. I have never felt more like prey in my entire life. Like, I literally felt like I was a caged animal while he was circling around me. I wish I could describe better the way he was talking and the way he was looking, but just understand that, like, people have said strange things to me before, but I've just never gotten such a deeply unsafe feeling from a person. And before you ask, yes, I told my parents, I told my boss, I got numbers for security in case he comes back. Also, I know I probably should have handled this very differently. Now that I've had time to think about it, I can think of many things I could say that would be more assertive, that would stand up for myself better. But you also have to remember I was alone. There was no one around. I was nervous because it was my first week. I was nervous because he was scary. I didn't want to say something that might upset him, that may cause him to either do something to me in the moment or to stay and watch me and stalk me. Especially because I was closing soon, and to close I have to go back out through a dark alley in the mall and go out to this little, like, alleyway where the dumpsters are that's very dark. There's no one around. So I was scared that if I upset him, he would follow me or do something bad. But thankfully he didn't. All was well. The story could have been a lot worse. But I really did feel so unsafe, and I really believe that he had absolutely terrible intentions, even though he didn't act on them. But luckily I'm safe, and he only came back once after that, and he never said anything more to me. But that's all. Thanks for listening. Have a great night, everyone.